Welcome everyone to another episode of the podcast of the Political Science program here at Texas A&M University in San Antonio. My name is Eugen Nagy. I am the producer and moderator of this podcast and the faculty here in the program. And I'm delighted to have as guest today Dr. Durant Frantzen, who is the chair of the Department of Criminology and Political Science at Texas A&M San Antonio, and who's also a professor of criminology. And we're continuing our series of conversations with people both from within the university and from the outside, because we want to look at, the central theme of this podcast is basically looking at life in the academia and political science more specifically, and look at all these aspects. And I think that this conversation will be very interesting because we will look at the life of a department and what it means to lead a department. So welcome, Dr. Frantzen.
Well,
welcome,
thank you for
Durant.
It's great to be here. Yeah, I really been looking forward to this.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So, Durant Frantzen, this is a weird name. Explain yourself.
So yeah, my mother's maiden name, that's where I get my first name, and then my last name is, of course, German. So my dad is from Fredericksburg, and his parents from Fredericksburg, and it's a big German town, settled here back in around 1850. So so that's where I get my roots from, basically, is
Fredericksburg, Texas.
Fredericksburg, Texas, yeah.
Few people know
right.
the strong German imprint here around San Antonio.
Yeah. No, so New Braunfels, Fredericksburg. It's a big area where German settlers came. In the mid 19th century, so it's just been something that's been around. So there's Wurstfest. There's lots of events around Central Texas where
German beer.
Yeah, German beer. So yeah, if you ever go out to the hill country, you'll definitely see the effects of the culture and so forth. So.
And what do you know about your family's history beyond your parents?
Beyond my parents. So, my dad, of course, grew up in Fredericksburg. His parents came from, were born here in Central Texas in New Braunfels, I think, and then they came to Fredericksburg after that. But I'm not sure how far back you want to go.
As far as you want.
Yeah. So, obviously my ancestors from my dad's side came to Fredericksburg, or came to Galveston initially, and then to New Braunfels, and then to Fredericksburg. But it was a pretty quick transition once they arrived in Galveston, which was, I think, in 1849. And so that's pretty much hasn't really changed since that point in time on my dad's side. My dad is one of four brothers. There's two remaining, and he still lives in the Fredericksburg area. And then, so my mom's side is a little bit more murky in terms of
trajectory.
Yeah, the trajectory and who came, and I'm not as familiar with that, but they're also native to Central Texas, grew up in the Barrera area, also grew up in Johnson City. She was one of 7 siblings, the youngest. She's passed and no longer here. But as far as predominantly, one culture or the other, she's more of, I guess in her family, it's more of a mix of French, German, American Indian,
Typical American.
Typical American, correct. Yeah.
So you grew up in Fredericksburg?
No, I grew up in Austin.
In Austin, okay.
My dad grew up in Fredericksburg.
Okay.
Yeah, we moved to Austin.
Okay.
He moved to Austin in the 1960s. After he got done with college, and so I was born in 1969. Grew up in Austin. In Austin. Okay. Yep. Grew up in Austin. Lived there until really my late 20s, and went to high school at Johnston High. which is no longer a high school. It's now something else.
What is it?
It is it's like a trade school.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, it closed during the early 2000s. It's just, it was. So when I went to high school, it was right at the beginning of the busing, sort of the big busing movement, and so I was part of that and grew up in Oak Hill, and then went to high school on the east side, which is where Johnston was, and since then I think they just closed several schools down and what have you. But I graduated in 1987, and that closed in the early 2000s. So, and then after that went to Texas State University in San Marcos, or what was then Southwest Texas State University. Now it's Texas State. Got my undergrad there in 1995. And then master's in 2000.
Same place?
Same place, yep. So I was working at the time throughout my undergrad and throughout my master's. And before I was in academia, I was in loss prevention. I was a manager started in Austin.
So in security, criminology expanded.
Exactly, yeah. And so I did that from really 1995 through about 2005. I started at Target and then moved over to Home Depot in 1999. So I started at Target in 1995, went to Home Depot in 99, and then we transferred over to the Woodlands area, which is north of Houston, and I was promoted to a supervisor where I oversaw a few stores there in the Houston area, and it was basically doing the same thing.
How was that work? What is your main takeaway from those years spent doing loss prevention? Which is a nice euphemism.
Yeah. It was definitely exciting. It's very exciting work. There are parts, of course, that are not so fun to do. I was responsible for basically all of the inventory in the stores that I oversaw. So theft is one aspect of that, but there's also a lot of paperwork type errors that can happen. And so that part is not necessarily as interesting, but overall, I it was a great experience. I did that for 10 years.
Had a way to do law enforcement, so to speak.
Worked closely with law enforcement, both local, federal. There were a lot of investigations I worked on that were multi-jurisdictional. In the Houston area, it's a very active market. Back at that point in time, things were different. Technology was not as common as it is today. It wasn't as advanced. When I first started in loss prevention, and I can recall back in one of the Home Depot stores when I was in training, there was a small little black and white camera that was used to monitor the bookkeeping area in one of the stores, and it barely worked. But by the time I left, computers and cameras were everywhere. I could be in one store and see what was going on in another store and watch real time, things that were happening. So, things changed quite dramatically just during the time I was there. But overall, it was a great experience. I still draw a lot on the things that that happened during that time frame in my courses, and so
that's what I was thinking.
Good.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Plus, some of your students will go to work in a similar line of work, right?
Yes, we do have some students who end up going into private security, whether that's loss prevention or other aspects. So the criminal justice system is very broad. Most people think just police, just prison guard, just prosecutor, that kind of thing. But there are a lot of different agencies and parts that are not necessarily as high profile as that you see on the news all the time, that work closely with law enforcement. And so private security is a big part of that. We wouldn't, as a society, we don't really realize the importance and kind of everything
and
that
the
they
size.
do. Yeah, the size and the scale and the
Yeah.
various facets of that.
Yeah.
The whole financial sector, financial investigations, IRS. That's a federal agency, of course, but on the private side, the banking industry, all of that, insurance fraud, those kinds of things are
and now cybersecurity and
cybersecurity, definitely. I mean, all of those aspects are intricately woven into our society, but they invariably rely on the criminal justice system to make an impact, right?
Yeah. That's where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. Yeah,
correct.
but the preparation, the whole infrastructure is done by all these elements and all these actors, which kind of leads us naturally to asking you this question, since that's not my field. What is criminology? It's a fun name.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm envious because when I say political science, they're like, "Oh, I don't care about politics." It's much more than that.
Yeah,
but with criminology,
you can boil it down to very simple. It's the study of crime and its causes.
Oh.
That's criminology. And so people often say, "Well, what's the difference between criminology and criminal justice?" Well, really, the difference is that criminal justice is the study of the system. So how courts, police, corrections, all of that work together. So the different system components and those kinds of things. And criminology is more about the study, the theoretical component to it, which it's really a false dichotomy. People think that, criminology, criminal justice. There's one point in time where people thought, those things are very different. Well, they're not. In reality, when you look at society in general, because people are human, and of course, studying the causes of why they commit crime are very, complicated, right? I mean, and so we have courses on theory, criminological theory, and so there's lots of different vantage points that we can look at. Well, what is the cause? What are causes of crime?
The context, the factors.
Exactly. Environment versus individual, and and people ultimately have contact with the system, and then they're sort of, well, how does the system respond to individual behavior? Well, that's not just criminal justice or criminology. That's a blend of the two.
Yeah. Okay, well, how did you discover your interest in this? Because I said I'm envious because it's, when you say criminology, you have a lot of majors in the program because it sounds sexy, and it's also because everybody knows CSI, everybody knows all these TV series, Law and Order. Political science is harder. You can watch West Wing. There's fewer such TV shows. So how did you discover that you had an inclination towards this field?
Well, I think it started with the work I was doing in loss prevention and private security.
So you did that before?
Yeah, I did that before. I started in '95 and actually started. I started at Texas State before that, and I was actually I started out as a journalism major, really, and then I switched over to criminal justice, probably somewhere in the early 90s, maybe a year or so before I started work at Target. I don't know really, what sort of led me into that direction, but it was definitely reinforced through the work that I was doing in the private security. So I had a high school friend, that sort of introduced me or put the word out, that hey, we're hiring, for this position, and he was already working in the, at one of the stores, and he was a supervisor, and encouraged me to apply. So once I started work in that area, I think it just sort of, grew from there.
Yeah. But do you remember? Do you have any memories or a moment, maybe in your childhood, where you manifested an interest? Did you did you watch a lot of movies, TV shows about crime? And I mean, we all do, but did you have like a more specific?
I wouldn't say, but of course, I do remember. There were a lot of shows that I watched that were very interesting.
Your favorite being?
I would say Cops, I watched that a lot growing up.
We all know the song.
Miami Vice,
Yes.
of course.
Yes.
But there were multiple shows growing up that were very interesting. However, I didn't really at the time. Growing up as a youngster, I wasn't really that set on making this a career, or being a police officer or working in the criminal justice system, being a practitioner. I did at one point want to be a game warden. That was one of the things. So I grew up.
Which part did you like, the nature part or the warden part? Spending time outside,
both.
or
I mean, really both. I mean, being outside as a kind of as that's your office more or less. That is.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, that is hard to beat, really. And so I grew up in the hill country. My dad, of course, being from Fredericksburg, had some property, and we still do in the Fredericksburg area. So I grew up on a ranch and on a farm doing a lot of nature stuff. And so hunting, fishing, and those kinds of things, and just having a respect for nature.
Avoiding snakes.
Exactly, yeah, to the best of my ability. So yeah, and so that kind of motivated me and intrigued me. But as I sort of grew older, I also was very interested in advertising, but that quickly faded. I just at some point in time, I think I really kind of realized that wasn't something I wanted to do long term.
Yeah, long term. Yeah. So you worked on the practical side. I can relate to that because it's similar, right? I have my background in practical sort of implementation and design of policy before joining the academia. What was the moment and how did you decide to? Of course, you got a master's degree, and that's when you thought, I want to stay in the academia and pursue this academic path, or was it a combination of factors?
Yeah, so I think, really in graduate school at Texas State, I had a few professors there that went to Sam Houston. And, so they would, kind of talk about what their research was in, where they went to school, kind of what life was like here and there. At Sam Houston. So that kind of perked my interest, listening to them and so forth. And then from there, I just kind of,
You liked what you heard in terms of the life of an academic?
Yeah, the life of an academic, continuing on with graduate school. I enjoyed being in school. I thought that, being a professor sounded pretty cool. If I could get to that level, it would be great. And so when I was in the graduate program, we were already in the Woodlands area. I had to finish up my graduate work sort of remotely. And so I would drive for about a year. I drove from the Woodlands area back to San Marcos to finish up my coursework. So I was already near Sam Houston. And
which is located where?
It's in Huntsville. Okay. So that's only about a 20 or 30-minute drive from the Woodlands, and I worked in the Houston area. So I was kind of up and down the I-45 corridor. And so I thought, and I had a neighbor actually who was a professor there as well, in political science, by the way, John Domino.
What a good name.
Yeah. And so, I'd have conversations with him, and, I just ended up applying and got accepted and saw history.
And then again, you got the taste of it while doing it, and you stuck with it.
Yep.
And so then, when did you what was your first job as a professor?
So my first job was down in Laredo at Texas A&M International.
Okay.
I was visiting. I started there toward the end of my coursework at Sam Houston, when I was just before I started my dissertation. I was there from 2005 to 2008 as a visiting. And
so basically afterwards, immediately you moved here.
Yep. In 2008, moved here to Texas A&M San Antonio, and at the time we were part of Kingsville, actually, in 2008. It was Texas A&M Kingsville at San Antonio or San Antonio Systems Center. And all of our whole campus, if you will, was over off Gillette Boulevard, which is not far from here, across the street from Palo Alto. So it was an elementary school, and you know, so there were just a few programs there, and but we would run classes out of there, and so we were there from, I think, what, two or three, I think 2011 we moved over here to the MAVA building. And
this is why this is one important topic that I want to cover with you, because you've been here since basically this university started growing, right? Because it's been growing immensely in the last 15 years. That's basically the period, right? I mean, now and it continues to grow.
Correct.
So can you just describe the period up to this point? Because now it's a full-fledged university, but it was just a satellite, right?
Right. Yeah, it was connected with Kingsville, and then even after we got standalone status in 2009, we were still upper division in a few master's programs. And so a lot fewer students, a lot fewer programs. We didn't have all of the different support offices that we have now.
Of course.
You know, I think there's been a lot of change, a lot of growth in all the programs, really.
Incredible growth. I mean, this is like 10 years is nothing. You know, 15 years is nothing, and it's a whole campus now.
But you know, I mean, being involved with it has been very rewarding, you know, just like anything else. And challenging. A lot of growth pains along the way, but also a lot of successes. And, you know, so I try to, you know, just, you know, focus on that and you know, but where we are now compared to where we were then, it's really amazing to see, you know, that we went from being in an elementary school to downward expansion, and the downward expansion part in 2016 was really a pivotal point, I think, in the history of the university. Because
explain what that means.
So downward expansion, we were upper division prior to that, and then we became a 4-year institution, right? So being able to offer all of those freshman classes and accept students straight from high school.
Not just transfers from community colleges.
Right, yeah, we were no longer a transfer institution. And so with that downward expansion, the university got a good amount of funding, right, to hire faculty. We hired an immense number of faculty.
Of course,
you know, I think there was somewhere near 50 or so faculty hired in that very first year across the university.
Yeah, that's a gigantic expansion.
Yeah, you know, and then developing the core curriculum, you know, and starting to offer classes, and you know, just the size of the staff and the number of people here on campus, and it really exponentially sort of made things more a different feel. Right? You know, I mean, because you know, prior to that we were a
small group.
You know, it was
everybody knew everyone.
Everybody knew everyone. You know, things were pretty easy to manage, but you know. After that, you know, we had some adjusting. There was definitely a big adjustment period, and a lot of things that we didn't do right. But you know, I think we learned pretty well from those things, and you know, so it's definitely stabilized a lot, you know, since then, which is good. But
and yet the university keeps growing. I mean, we just look around and we see new buildings literally being built in front of our eyes. I mean, this is not a figure of speech. There's literally one being built on the other side of this building. There's another one there. So I mean, it's growing physically. We can see this growth. Absolutely. But this is due to the success. This success is due to the growth in enrollment. Why do you think this university has been so successful in attracting students?
Well, I think...
And continuing to attract students.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there is, you know, a big need for a public university. In this area of San Antonio specifically, but San Antonio overall. I think in general, UTSA, of course, they've been here for a long time. But other than UTSA, all the other schools are private schools.
And smaller.
Which, you know, make it more difficult for some students to attend who can't afford them. And the fact that
So you're emphasizing the public
cost,
school and the
yeah,
cost.
yeah, we're definitely a lot more accessible, I think, than a lot of those private schools for a lot of kids. And then the kids that maybe are a little intimidated by a big university, by large class sizes and so forth, may not feel like UTSA is their best option. So A&M, of course, has that going for it, and the fact that we're part of the A&M system, I think, is a huge draw for a lot of students.
In what way?
We have the name brand, brand, A&M, the A&M system. When someone gets their degree from an A&M school, it carries a little bit of, I think,
it's known.
A lot.
It's
well known, right? It carries more weight than I think a lot of other public schools.
Yeah, cachet.
Yeah, absolutely. And very respected system, and so, and as we've grown too, the faculty that we've hired, staff that we've hired, have just increased in their experience and their expertise, right? So we have the best. I think we have a lot of really high producing faculty here at this point in time, and I think that'll even just get better over time.
The relatively new president of the university, who came in a year ago, basically.
A little over a year.
And I remember in his first speech, the beginning of the year, and he said that the model that he has in mind, at least at that point, was the university in what's the name of the university, the town on the border, basically under New Mexico. Oh, I'm so bad with names.
Are you talking about in Texas?
In Texas, yeah. It's just the corner of Texas under New Mexico.
Oh, El Paso, UTEP.
El Paso, yeah.
UTEP.
That's a good model, he said, for us, because it's a high-level research. I think it's an R1 university, which also serves underprivileged and underserved populations, so manages to balance these two. I think that's a great sort of a picture to have in mind, right?
Right, yeah. That UTEP has been cited as a sort of kind of model university for us for a while now, even before him. President Matson would mention that too, and so
it kind of fits our position.
It
That's
fits,
what I mean.
Definitely. The student population, the geographic elements are similar. And so I think that we do have a lot to learn by the things that they've done well, and it's taken them a long time to get to where they're at. So with that, I think we can learn a lot from kind of how to do things and so forth. So.
We do have this we are part of this category of what Spanish serving or what
Hispanic serving.
Hispanic serving, Hispanic serving institution
Hispanic.
Officially,
HSI,
obviously, because we have a large proportion of our students is Hispanic.
Right.
And obviously you've stuck around, so you kind of found your place, it seemingly.
Yeah.
Both in the university and in San Antonio.
Yeah, I really love it here. I mean, it's being a part of the university since it's in its infant stages and just growing, and I've really sort of just developed a connection with the campus and
maybe with the mission.
And with the mission of the university, the students. The students, they're great. I mean, the students here are, the thing I really like about them is they really want to be, they're really looking to try to better themselves. They're in it to win it.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that students at other universities are not, but there's something about our students here that really, motivates me. I enjoy working with them, seeing them, get to whatever goal that they've established. Is very rewarding to me, but just being a part of the university and the growth gives me a lot of satisfaction that it's
something is being built that has a very clear mark and impact.
Correct. Yeah. It's been a great 18 years, being here.
18 years.
Yeah. So I'm in my 19th year actually with the system, and then
You get some medal when you're 20, right?
Yeah,
And you get the 25. Was it 25 that you get some special notice?
I really don't know.
Your notice especially. I think the people
know.
who get 25 years, they got something at the last time. Also, part of these changes was that the department of which you were a member and then a chair has changed a lot. So when did you become a chair, and what was the name of the department then? What did it contain then?
So we were a department of arts and humanities prior to
The School of,
Yeah. Well, we were the College of Arts and Sciences and the Department of Arts and Humanities.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
and then there were two departments at that particular time, and that was at downward expansion. So when we downward expanded, we divided the Department of Arts and Humanities into two: Social Sciences and Humanities, and Arts and Humanities. I believe that retained the same. It was either Humanities or Arts and Humanities. So, so a few programs went one way, and then Social Sciences was political science, Criminology, and then Sociology. That was 2000.
Those three?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That was 2016, and. So, and then of course, just recently until last fall, was the same through programs, and then we split again. We've added several programs since downward expansion. So, the college was at a point where we needed to add 2 more departments. So we added sociology, communications, and then. So the behavioral health, I think, is the other one. And so now we are, 7 departments across instead of 5, and 2 more department chairs.
So when did you become a chair of whatever the name was of the department?
Yeah, in 2016.
16, when with the downward.
When downward expansion happened.
And was this sort of it was your turn? Was it something you wanted to do? Because sometimes it's like they take turns.
Yeah, I think there was. I wasn't completely, I guess. Set on being a chair. It was part necessity, but there was also part of me that wanted to do it as well. I felt like it was a good step for me, professionally to, have that change in my role, and I was already a program coordinator. I knew the university pretty well. I knew the programs pretty well and the faculty. It definitely was something that I wanted to do. However, it's like at that particular time with downward expansion and so much happening, there was a lot to kind of wrap my arms around in terms of just being able to manage all of the different things that were changing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it was definitely a learning experience.
Yeah. And there was no one around to show you the ropes as such, because the whole university was going through the same process.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you've been a chair since, basically. Yeah. Why? Do you really enjoy the position? Seemingly.
I do. And I feel like after you do it for a while, you get more comfortable dealing with.
Well, you get sick of it. There's different outcomes.
Yeah, it really it's I guess it's different for everybody, right? I mean, some people don't really want to be a chair ever, and others, maybe they do it because they need to, or they only want to do it for a short period of time. I feel like
and others shouldn't be chairs,
or they shouldn't be. So
yeah.
I mean, I think that I can add a lot of value. I mean, I feel like my experience of being a chair adds a lot of value and makes the department, or helps the department. Or I feel like that's been something that's been a good experience, and I feel like I've helped a lot of students and faculty. New faculty hired, and growing programs, and seeing people be successful in their position. I think that's really what gives me the satisfaction of being a department chair, is that you can impact people in a lot of different ways, right? From when they're hired here and they start, and things that they get involved with, working with faculty in various capacities, whether that's through research and collaborating even across the university. That's always a good experience. And then, being able to, do things with the programs, add more courses, add degree plans, and then, you see kind of like how students really benefit from that, and I think that gives me a lot of
encouragement, motivation.
Yeah, motivation and satisfaction for doing what I'm doing. And so when I see that, it's kind of the reason why I want to continue to be a chair, and why I've been a chair for so long is I see students have benefited a lot from not just me, but the university as a whole. It's not just me working by myself. It's me working with other faculty and colleagues and people across the university. Do things I can't. I have to work with people to get things done, and that's been very rewarding to me.
Yeah.
But also like teaching and doing research. So being a chair too is a bit challenging to stay engaged to the extent that you really, as a faculty member, that you're used to doing, because you have so many other responsibilities. But I think it's doable. It's definitely doable. It's just that you can't do it to the same extent that you did when you were just a faculty. Well, I say just a faculty member, but when you were a faculty member. Yeah. And I think that is can be a tough balance, for some people. And I don't think I've done it perfect as well.
But I noticed that you've been this was, it's very nice that you're answering questions without me asking them, because I had them, they were coming up, but it's, you're sort of going, answering them before I ask them, which is great. Because I think I've noticed, right, that you do have a balance. There is a balance that you have constructed, and it's never perfect. Mm-hmm. Because, as you said, one of the big challenges of being in an administrative position, right, when I was managing programs of international development, the reason why I left that is because I couldn't write or read and publish, which I really wanted to do, because it was 12 hours a day doing that, and finding that balance is a challenge. But I think you kind of, because you continue to publish and to do research and to teach, right? But that seems to be one of the important challenges of this position, if you want to keep being a faculty as well, right?
Right.
What's another important? Because you mentioned what is the best thing about being a chair. What's the hardest part of being a chair?
Well.
Because students, right, who are part of our public, who will see this episode, they don't know what a chair does, right? So this is very informative for them. Yeah,
I mean, difficult situations often, they do come up, and I think for a lot of chairs, and just like other administrators, and for the students and faculty going through those challenges, whether it's conflicts with students, other conflicts, that people are having. So, helping faculty or students work through different conflicts that they're having can be challenging, and there's not always an easy answer, for what to do, right?
A unidimensional answer,
Right. So, but it does work out in a lot of cases. I'm able to kind of help people transition through those conflicts and get back to a place where people are productive and feel like they're not in a difficult, they don't feel like they feel comfortable, right? That's where I want everyone to feel like they're in an environment where they can do their best, right? That's really the key thing is what is it that's preventing someone from being able to achieve their fullest potential? And so however I can do that is where I kind of put my focus, right?
Would you say that that's kind of your leadership or motto, sort of, or sort of guiding?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's a big part of it. And just trying to get people where they feel like they can thrive here, whether that's new faculty member or faculty member who's been here a while. What's the next step in their career? What is it that they're trying to achieve, research-wise, teaching-wise, professionally-wise? If there's something that I can offer them in terms of advice, I obviously will do that. If there's something I can refer them somewhere, or someone else that I know that can help them, I will lean on whoever it is, right, to give them the information they need to help them be successful in what they're trying to do. So that's,
and also to be the best at their job, right?
The best at their job, exactly.
Yeah.
Professionally, teaching, research, service, all those things are the three pillars, right, of what a faculty member does.
That's interesting, because when I visited, one of the many things that you can visit in Fredericksburg is the Museum of the Pacific War. And when I visited that, I wrote down the Chester Nimitz from there, which is why they have the museum, right? And I even saw his family's tomb in the cemetery, the German cemetery. And there's a quote from him in the museum, his leadership motto. Leadership consists of picking good men and helping them do their best.
That is true.
Right?
Yep.
It kind of is along the lines of what well, I wanted to ask about what you think about this motto. Well, you kind of said it.
No, it is so true. I mean, hiring good people is really a critical component of being, in an administrative role, whether it's a dean, a chair, provost, or president, or whoever it is that's doing the hiring. Faculty search committees, that is a very critical component to shaping the trajectory of the university. Their expertise when they bring in, that's going to affect the research that they do, the interests of the students, the shape of curriculum, the courses we offer, all of those things. The impact of that is very long lasting. So really, how we hire people and train them and develop them, that is.
But that's the most important capital a university.
Yeah, it's often I think it's kind of underestimated, or maybe a little overlooked, as far as the role of that and and the processes that are in place to ensure that is the best that it can be, are very critical, especially in when we're hiring faculty, because the way you hire a faculty member is a lot different than when you hire someone in the private sector. If there's a job, someone is applying for in the private sector, you do a posting, you do interviews, those kind of things. But then they start, pretty immediately, right? Or within a short period of time after those interviews. Well, it's different in faculty, right? I mean, it's like, there's a whole semester
it can be a year.
searches, and then they don't start until the next year. Yeah. So when someone leaves, then that whole process has to kind of restart, and it's not as I guess seamless or easy, right? To
plus whoever was there left their mark, made their mark, their imprint. Right. The course is their specialty. The courses they taught. Right. The new person will not be the same. Right. So there's this whole change of the nature of the department with every person.
Exactly. Yeah. And it takes time to build a good base of faculty and staff, and then it's so important retaining them, doing what you can as a colleague, a chair in the university in general, having the resources in place to keep good people. That is essential to the university and the growth of the university. So we're not always in that cycle of, okay, we're going to go back and try to rehire someone,
It's a very frustrating cycle to be in.
Yeah.
So, and yet, right, you have all of these responsibilities as a chair, and yet you want, and you are attracted, you are motivated to continue your research work as well. What would you say are the main issues that sort of attract you in terms of your research? What are the things that you want to think and write about? So nowadays, or in general.
So I think
because you publish on many things.
Yeah,
So I couldn't figure out exactly what is the.
The program that at Sam Houston is it's a very general. The PhD the program itself is a very general program, and so I feel like I'm a generalist in that aspect. And my I guess early experiences there in the program were more on the corrections side. I co-authored a book on the death penalty, so I was that was sort of my first area of just really kind of doing more in-depth research on death penalty cases and death penalty law and so forth, and then but my dissertation was in policing. My dissertation focused on police interrogation, and was more qualitative in nature. It consisted of interviews with police detectives, and where I focused largely on their perceptions of the effectiveness of different interrogation tactics that they would use with different types of offenders, and so working with police departments has also been pretty rewarding as well. I've done several projects with police, the SAPD, Barrera County Sheriff's Office, grants that I've been on over time.
Boards on which you served, yeah.
What's that?
Boards on which you've served.
Yes, yeah. The President's Task Force, 20th Century Task Force we did with SAPD, but yeah, there's so there's been the policing aspect of it. There's been around 2012-13, I started to develop an interest in the specialty courts and again jail reentry programs. We had a student here.
Can you explain what that is? Specialty courts?
Yeah, specialty courts are specific courts, local courts mostly, that focus on high-risk populations who are, whether it's a drug addiction or a mental health issue, or they have some sort of status, maybe it's a veteran. But over time, and around the early 1990s, late 80s, specialty courts became more and more common because we're trying to prevent recidivism as a broader nation, right? And so developing these specialized dockets afforded the communities to implement treatment programs connected with the court system. So it was a intentional effort to bring people in to into a setting where everyone was sort of more easily communicating about the status of people and being able to address issues with addiction and mental health. And so drug courts developed. They were the first specialty court. And then from there, it sort of expanded into mental health, veterans treatment courts, DWI courts. Now there are specialized documents for felony drug and misdemeanor drug cases, DWI cases. And so in the I'd say around 2012, 2013, I had a student here who was working as a reentry specialist at the jail, and she said, "Hey, I'd like to introduce you to the jail programs manager over at the jail. There are some programs here that you may be able to provide some insight on." So I started. I made that connection with the jail programs manager, and that led to some evaluations that we did of the jail programs that they were offering, reentry programs. So when someone comes into the jail, they're there usually a pretty short time frame, 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
But during that time frame, they can attend different programs that the jail offers, and it's just to kind of get them out of their cell and kind of help them get back on their feet, whether that's a substance abuse program, anger management program, their GED program. So there were all these specialty programs, and what they wanted was someone to kind of look at them and provide some guidance on how to make them better. And so we implemented a few things during that time frame to help the jail reentry managers focus on the people who really needed the help the most. Because what was happening essentially is, someone would come into jail and then they would sign up for one of those programs, and they may or may not even needed the program, but the programs only had a certain capacity to hold. So it was sort of like, okay, whoever wants to come to these programs can come. And then, but then there were certain people who really needed it, right? And so we developed a triage kind of system where when someone was booked into jail, there would be certain things, parameters during their intake process that would be recorded. And then from that, a report would be generated to the reentry specialists where they could sort of identify process, people who were coming in and out of jail very frequently, right? And so who were the high-risk people? And so from developing that high-risk report, the jail reentry managers could say, okay, these are the people that really need to be in these programs. We need to, be a little bit more intentional about how we're offering and who should be coming to these, things and so forth. And so we did that, and then there were a few other things we evaluated. So from that, then I was sort of became acquainted with other personnel, other people in the local courts, and met the director of the drug courts, and so that led into several evaluations that I did of the drug courts, DWI courts, from roughly 2014 or 15 all the way to 2019. So the county would get grants funded by Substance Abuse Mental Health Administration, Bureau of Justice Assistance, federal agencies, and then as part of that grant, they would need someone to come in and evaluate them. So that's what I did. And so the whole idea with the specialty courts is to say, you have people in the programs, they're very resource intensive. You have to pay treatment providers, staff to. So
let's use it more effectively. Yeah.
Right, and so do they do better than people who are on standard probation for similar offenses? So it was really about measuring the effectiveness of the program and reducing recidivism. Recidivism is really the gold standard when you talk about what
crime
is
prevention.
What is it that makes programs worth it? What's the cost effectiveness in doing these things? So,
well, from what you're saying, it seems to me, of course, I'm sure it's case by case, but it seems to me that you also have found people interested and willing to cooperate and to improve. Would it be correct to say? At local level, in the community, like you're right, because you created all these avenues of offering basically specialized knowledge, right? Consultancy, studies, and reports. They were open to these inputs from you.
I mean,
because that's not necessarily true always, right?
And I really think that there's the community wants and I think has a big need for involving universities in the work that they do, whether that's in the criminal justice system or any other part. But forming those relationships it can be a very challenging thing because there's lots of things that can get in the way, right? People are hesitant sometimes about outreach. They don't know who to contact, and then so having that comfort level with people I think is important. But and then people on the faculty side, sometimes they're not sure who to reach out to, or it takes a lot of effort really on both sides. Whether
but
that's
also willingness and interest.
But when there is a need, right, to do something, I think it can be easier than people think. Right, and so once those relationships are established, then things then there's a trust level. And then that can kind of just build on, and I think that's what helped through the specialty courts in the jail is that once I had those relationships with the people there, I was able to continue to get more projects and be involved with more projects.
For trust begets trust.
For for that period of time, and so it, I think it's a good. It's very rewarding when faculty are able to get out in the community and share their expertise with community partners. It has so many impacts for the faculty member and also for whoever it is that they're working with, and students. The students can get involved, and that's really is what has happened over that time frame is through the evaluations and things that I was doing there. I was able to get students employed there,
research
internships.
Yeah.
I started to know all of the different people working in the specialty courts. So I was able to build on that in a lot of different ways, and those relationships have just stayed in place.
And especially in fields that are so immediately related to the community, right? I mean, criminology, clearly it's about what's happening around us, right? It's very important to have these bridges with the community and to have these channels of pushing the people into the job that they want to pursue. Speaking of which, you also served sometimes as a media expert. I saw, if one were to ask you, well, you're a professor in criminology, you're in San Antonio, what can you tell me? I've never been there, about San Antonio in terms of crime, the safety, law and order situation. How would you describe it to someone who hasn't been to San Antonio? What is that? What is the situation? I know it's a very complicated question, and I don't know if it can be answered in one way or other, but what's your take on that, if someone would ask you? Someone from Maryland.
The issues in San Antonio are really not that different than they are in any other major city. That would be my first observation. And it's the seventh largest city in the world. It has the same sorts of issues that are pretty common around the United States in major cities. So I think in that regard, it may be a little deceiving, I guess. People think, well, you're in San Antonio and you're in Texas, and it's close to the border, so there must be different. And so there are some issues that are unique. I mean, we obviously have a lot of things that happen that are border related, but I think a lot of times people think that it's more than what it really is. When you're talking about border crime, people. There's a lot of politics involved with that, and are immigrants, for example, more likely to commit crime than anyone else, the average criminal? And research has shown no. They're no more likely to be involved in crime. They may be even less likely to be involved in crime than the average person who gets arrested. And so, there's a lot of myths around that and misperceptions as far as, maybe certain cities have certain issues, and more issues than other areas. And it's very nuanced, right? So crime is very fluid, but then there are a lot of things that are the same, and they're same issues. Whether it's a rural area or an urban area, you're definitely, there's some intractable problems that are, they've always been there, right? That are sort of antecedents for crime. And so the ways that you deal with those things are not going to be fundamentally different from one city to the next, one jurisdiction to the next. It's about doing them well.
What are some of these intractables?
Oh, poverty, lack of education, lack of employment. When you think about, what is it that causes crime, the theories that guide crime and help us understand crime, all kind of, the social learning theory, right? The differential association, and social control. There are psychological types of theories that attempt to kind of explain, thinking processes and what have you. But these are all pretty stable, from one area to, and not even in the United States, across the world, right? I mean, it's the same kinds of things. Now, the United States is different in a lot of ways because we obviously have this a proliferation of gun violence, right, that you don't necessarily see in other countries.
Well, so if you don't have guns, it's hard to use
If you don't have guns, right, you're not going to have gun violence. And so that's something that certainly separates us from other countries. But it's really about addressing sort of the root causes of crime, and those are things that are really traced back to early childhood experiences in most cases. People, their predisposition toward crime is often formed very early. It's not to say that someone can be a model child and later they get involved. That does happen. But oftentimes it's those early experiences that people have that lead them into crime. There are theories, life course persistent offenders and life course theories of crime that seek to really kind of differentiate people in their exposure to crime early as opposed to later in life, and sort of their changes in their criminal trajectory over different points in time. And that certainly happens, right? People who are involved, some people who are involved with crime start very early, and then they just continue and build, and they commit more serious offenses as they, and then but then the majority of people actually may be delinquent, or who are delinquent actually desist from crime. That's what research shows, right? Meaning they stop committing crime. Right? So they may be a delinquent, quote unquote, or have engaged in delinquent conduct, or even maybe criminal conduct at an early age. Because we know that most people who engage in crime, there's this age crime curve, right? Between 18 and 25 is where someone is more likely to, they're more likely to engage in crime during that time frame. Why? Their maturity level, right? They're more likely to give in to peer pressure, temptations,
lack
and things.
of controls,
Their brain is, brain development, and this is where we get into the psychological components to crime and things of that nature, social learning. But we know that once people age, their predisposition toward crime goes down, right? Their likelihood that they're going to commit crime, so it goes up and then goes down.
Which has, again, biology, the social status and the situation changes, family, whatever, So if someone says, I want to move to San Antonio, should I move to San Antonio or not?
Absolutely. I mean, San Antonio is great. I love it here.
Obviously.
I mean, it's great. It's got a lot to offer. San Antonio is awesome.
I agree, but you're the subject of the interview.
I mean, it's
and for you, it's also very strategically located between Austin and Fredericksburg.
Somewhat,
it's a way of bridging the
of course,
or the triangle.
I mean, it's a large town, but it doesn't have some of the things that are kind of more undesirable about big cities.
Exactly.
The traffic.
Yeah.
And it does have traffic. Don't get me wrong. But
not all
it doesn't
the time.
take. I mean, having lived in Houston and now living in San Antonio, if you've lived in a big metro city and then you come to San Antonio,
let me not tell you about Washington D.C.
Exactly. Exactly. So there's that.
Coming back to the home turf. A department that contains very different programs that are obviously linked through the fact that they all deal with social issues, but they're different. And you are part of one of these programs. How is that? Because you're the chair, you're a professor of criminology, and yet you're a chair of the department that contains, let's say it was sociology and political science, now it's political science. So that also raised certain challenges, right? To get, sort of to manage, these are different beasts, and the people are different, and they come from different views. So what was the maybe the biggest thing you had to learn in terms of managing these different kinds of animals?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you just, try to find commonality, and there is a lot of commonality, even though the disciplines are the courses may be, the content in the courses is different, or different perspectives on different things. There's a lot of commonality. People are, they're, whether it's a program that's in a vastly different, a different college, College of Education or College of Business or College of Arts Sciences, or even within a department, there's always a link that faculty have a lot of the same needs and interests that anybody else has, within a program, for example, right? Yeah. They all want the same thing, and so helping them get to where they're at is really where you try to focus and try to help them get where they want to be. Yeah. And you try to create an environment where people interact and they can do things together, or get-togethers and things of that nature.
Welcoming,
and
friendly.
And where it's possible for people to collaborate, you do that, right? You try to facilitate the collaboration as much as you can, and there's we're in the social sciences, and naturally there's going to be a lot of connection and synergy between faculty on certain topics. Yeah. Criminology was born out of sociology. Yeah. Yeah. So the two disciplines are they're siblings. Yeah. Yeah. Political science.
Well, we have faculty who have published together. So
there are people with PhDs in political science that teach in criminology programs. And so the legal system and things of that nature are intricately woven. Yeah, the judicial system is right in the middle of the two things. Yeah. Exactly.
Having worked now with political scientists and managing a program in political science as a chair of a larger department, what is your perspective on political science? If someone, right? Because I know it's an interesting question, but how do you see political science?
How do I see political science?
Yeah, you're not in it. I mean, you are an honorary member, but how do you see it?
I think that it's extremely valuable and very interdisciplinary. Maybe a little bit mystifying to some students, because it's not immediately apparent what one would do with a degree in that. However, I think that it's at the same time very rewarding for students to be able to pursue that degree and the things that they learn, and can open up a lot of different doors for them career-wise, and enable them to go down a lot of different paths, whether that's graduate school, and then the different types of programs that it sets them up for in graduate school, I think is more versatile than criminology and criminal justice and a lot of other programs, to be honest. There's a lot of students in political science who go into law school. That seems to be a pretty natural
progression,
path. Natural path. But then there are also, and we have had a good number of students who have gone on to graduate school and PhD programs, and so it's a great way and a great path to go down, a great degree.
Especially, for instance, takes into account the fact that there are very different subfields within political science. I mean, it ranges very widely, right? From American government to comparative politics, where you look at different politics in different countries and regions, to international relations, which is international politics, how countries relate to each other, war and peace. We have a minor in that right here, conflict studies, to political philosophy, which goes to the deepest questions about what is a human being, what is society. So truly, you can go in so many ways.
Exactly.
And but the trick, as you mentioned, is helping the students discover the field. And I always say that this is why I love to teach introductory courses, not just those, but I love to teach those, because you always find students who will discover that this is something they want to do. Because naturally, it's always 5% who are naturally inclined towards understanding these things, and they had to take a class in political science, in politics, to understand that it's not about voting for Jim or for Bob, and it's not just about that. If you want to do that, fine, but this is much more than that. It's much more interesting.
Right.
One of the things that one of the purposes of this podcast is to also prove that academics are human beings, which is still to be proven, which means that they have a personal life and other interests besides their work. And so what does Dr. Durant Frantzen, what do you do when you're not here? Do you pursue your love for nature? Do you go somewhere fishing, avoiding snakes? What is it that you do outside of these boundaries?
Yeah, I mean, obviously being outdoors has been something that I've always done. I still love to do it.
But in what way? Hunting or hiking or fishing?
Hiking, not so much hunting anymore. Fishing, though, quite a bit. We'll go down the coast or just, wherever we go on vacation, things of that nature. Both of my sons are in scouts, so we're always outdoors.
Camping?
Doing things, camping, hiking.
What's your favorite place to hike in this area?
Big Bend is nice. That's
a little
like 8
far.
hours or so. No, I mean, there's lots of parks around here that are great. Garner State Park is relatively close. Government Canyon is also nice. That's even closer. But yeah, there's lots of places around here that are just nice to get outdoors.
Or you can just hike down the Riverwalk, towards the missions. It's really lovely that way.
Absolutely.
And besides going out in nature, other things that you like to do in your free time?
I really just like to spend time with my kids and my family.
Yeah.
So that's, my boys are very active with sports. And
how old are they?
One's a junior and one's a freshman.
Oh, there you go.
So they are both in high school, and one of them is in baseball and one of them is in football. So I'm very involved.
American football.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I do a lot with them in terms of their sports. So.
Taking them to games, watching games, rooting.
Taking them to games, practices, and all that good stuff.
Okay, putting pressure on the referee. No.
Yeah.
So, and we mentioned the fact that as I said, I'm envious about degrees such as or programs such as psychology or criminology, not because I want to pursue those degrees, but because students immediately understand what they're about, right? As we said, in political science, we have to introduce them, we have to attract them. And part of this is also because, people have an idea of it, but also it's about how they're, the culture around and how they inculturated what they see in the media, right? And with criminology, everybody, CSI, right? CSI, Law and Order, all these series. So, moving into that direction, you as a professor of criminology, do you have a movie or a TV show that you think is the best in really depicting the reality, or in some way bringing, showing something really interesting about this field of, criminology in general?
There's so many to choose from, right?
Well, I mean, not all of them are good, so that's what I'm saying.
No. I mean, they're entertaining, right?
Because I can tell you some good political science TV shows or movies and some bad ones. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like watching all of them, most of them anyway. But I think one that does a really good job of sort of portraying the criminal justice, the policing side of it specifically, there is a series called Bosch.
Yeah, I know Bosch, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that
especially the first part where he's actually in the police force.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure there are other good ones as well. I haven't seen all of them, but that's one I've watched relatively recently.
Have you seen The Wire?
I have not watched a lot of The Wire, but I have heard good things about that.
That seems to be, I've seen it, it's fantastic, but I was wondering, because, part of its renowned, why is it so well known is because it seems to be very realistic. So I was wondering if you...
Yeah, I've not seen that. I need to see that.
It's Baltimore, right? So it's all Baltimore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's there's a lot to choose from.
And if you would have a book that you would recommend, or your favorite book that has to do with your field of interest.
Oh shoot! I mean,
not academic book, I'm saying. Like something for a student to read. For example, in politics, of course, there's a lot, but in American government, immediately I can recommend All the President's Men, because that's such a fun book, with Woodward and Bernstein and Nixon.
And
that's just like so gripping, and immediately it gives you an insight.
Yeah, I mean, there's Grisham. Grisham's good to read. It's got some really good books. I don't think there's one particularly that is like sort of what I would say the go-to or anything, but
and that's the advantage of your program. There's so much, so many books, and they're so attractive in this field to read. So the university is growing tremendously. I think one of the, a chancellor or something was here and said it's the fastest growing university in the system, in the A&M system, or even in Texas, which is understandable for the reasons you mentioned, where we are, what we're doing. How about the department? How do you see the future of this department? What do you think, where are we heading? Where should we be heading in terms of our department?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so much, when you, back to what I was talking about the community, the more I think that what I would see is sort of like the future of the department would be is, how can the department be better connected with the community? So whether that, to further research interests, to collaboration and things of that nature, I think that's where really there's a lot of opportunity for faculty to develop their expertise, show their expertise in the community, and to enhance their profiles and the profile of the university and make an impact. So, through whether that's funded projects or just sort of any sort of projects that sort of naturally evolve from different sources, I think that it would be. I think that's where I think as we grow and get more faculty on board, we'll have more of those sorts of things that can enhance the department. And so, I think our department could potentially add programs. We may be able to add, like, maybe take a minor, for example, like legal studies, and change that into a major. It's it's a very popular minor. Maybe other programs as well that we may add down the line, whether that's undergraduate or graduate. So there's a lot of potential to do, I think, on the graduate side of things, and certificates and that nature. So I think that the fact that we're in a very large city puts us in a very good position to both collaborate with community partners, grow programs, as we'll have a lot of growth where we are geographically. We're in a good place in terms of student growth. It's not such the case in other parts of the United States. It's opposite. But here in San Antonio and in this region, we don't have those limitations, I think. So
or pressures,
right. So with more growth and more students, we're going to be able to grow. And I think that's a big
both in size and in terms of depth and
whether that's graduate
diversity,
programs and more programs at the undergraduate level. So and one of the things that we don't have here, which I think could and probably will happen, is a center of some sort. A center or a research center. Oriented around a particular theme. Which is something at certain larger schools have those things that are focused on immediate needs, and we have a hospital now that's being constructed, and so there is going to be a lot of collaboration between our university and the hospital, and so something around that could definitely be on the horizon as far as how we interact with the hospital and what sorts of research interests that fuels. So and then
but it's good to be faced with the dilemma of there's a lot to be done, right? It's better than to, oh my goodness, there's none, we can't do more.
There's a lot to do. There's always a lot to do, which is really the great thing about working at a university and being a faculty member and being an apartment chair or what have you is you can really make your own future. You can kind of shape and craft the things that you teach, the courses you develop, the collaborations you engage in. You have such freedom to do a lot of different things that is not necessarily the case, in other fields, right? I mean, but it's the future is bright.
And not for nothing, this podcast serves exactly that purpose, to connect the program with the community, with not just our students, because this podcast goes out everywhere, and also to elevate both the profile of the program, of the department, but also inform them about what this is. One, what is political science, what happens here, and again, as I said, this wonderful, shocking thing that academics are human too. And I think that's an aspect that students don't have always. So thank you so much for your time, Dr. Frantzen, and good luck in your continued work for us all.
Thank you. Thank you.
In our common work. And stay tuned for our next episode of the POLITalks at TAMUSA podcast. My name is Eugen Nagy. Thank you again.